William. We want to know how to make these.
Hello, hello. We're
Awesome. What's going on, everybody, and welcome to Skill.
excellent. Okay. For this class, I've gone ahead and assembled just a lot of stuff. This is all stuff I'm working on, so don't worry about all this stuff that's over here. Honestly, to do this class today, you just need some, I guess, very basic things. First, always recommend having a pencil. Eraser is even better, but honestly, you shouldn't even have to worry about erasing. So just a regular old pencil. After that, you're going to want measuring tape. If you don't have measuring tape, you can still get away with using just a regular piece of paper. Just cut it to a small strip that you can use in the place of measuring tape, because you could either use the numbers or you could just use a little piece of tape. I always suggest having a ruler. Rulers are just really, really handy to have. And of course, paper. Now, for this tutorial, you don't actually need leather. Since we're just learning how to put it together, you don't need it. You could just build the pattern. This is more of a pattern class than it is a leather bracer class. However, if you have leather, we're going to go ahead and put something together. In fact, if I make bracers out of this class, I'm probably going to end up building them and just giving them away to somebody, since I have enough bracers in my collection. I've got a whole bunch up there. So there we go. Now, to start this off, let's just go ahead and start off really. We're going to start off with just paper. Now, you might wonder what kind of paper to use. If you have 8.5 by 11, just printer copy paper, that's going to be good enough. Obviously, if you can get a better quality paper, I probably would. The best paper to use is you could either use, I guess if you have a sketchbook. Most sketchbooks or drawing books will have reasonably good paper for making patterns. And the good thing about using a sketchbook is they're usually a little bit larger. Instead of being 8.5 by 11 inches, you've usually got about 9 by 12, 11 by 14 is better. And I think they get up I know they get as big as 18 by 24, but I think 12 by 18 is pretty handy to have around the house. That's what this one is. This is 12 by 18. And if you don't use drawing paper, you can also use posterboard. Now, posterboard, don't get the really good high quality one. Really, you're just throwing your money away. You might think, oh, I want to have a good high quality paper. Posterboard is a good paper, and it's very rugged and it's durable, and that's great. However, it's one of those things where if you actually wanted to draw on your pattern and you expected to put designs on your pattern that you're going to transfer over to your bracer, then that posterboard is a little too thick. You'd have a really difficult time getting whatever design you put on your posterboard onto your leather. There's a way to do that. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But if you're going to use posterboard, buy the cheapest posterboard you can. I don't usually give plugs to stores or anything, but Walmart sells a really, really cheap bargain basement posterboard. If you actually want posterboard, you don't want to buy that posterboard for projects where you need posterboard, but for leather projects, that posterboard is actually the best one to get. It is, because it's a really cheap posterboard. It's a really thin grade of posterboard. So you can either use the crappiest posterboard you can find or the best regular paper you can find. One or the other. They're going to be about the same. Okay. Now, let's assume that you've only got, let's say that you've only got 8.5 by 11. If you got 8.5 by 11, that's going to make a fairly small bracer. You can see I'm going to put my hand right on this paper, and I'm going to try to close it up and close it up. If you're lucky enough that this thing actually goes all the way around your forearm, then this is going to be sufficient. If you have really big forearms, then you're probably going to have to do this. Take 2 pieces of paper, put them together, and then tape it down the middle. If that's all you've got is 8.5. If you've got this much bigger paper, something that's very large, much larger than what you need, then you only need the one sheet and you're good. The good thing about making bracers is you don't have to make 2 patterns. One arm should be about the same as the other. Yeah, you could say, well, I'm right-handed and I do everything with this. This one is going to be a lot bigger. It's going to be a little bit bigger. You might be a 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch bigger on one side than the other, but any other variance than that, you're probably looking at, half He-Man, half Whippy guy over here, and that's not most people. So you'll be fine with just one pattern. Okay, now, so right now I'm going to go ahead and give you some time, if you've only got the 8.5 by 11, to tape that together. So go ahead and do that. I'm not going to introduce any new information, and then I'll get this big old piece of paper, my 12 by 18 piece of paper up here in front and center, so you can take a look at it. Now, obviously, it's much wider this way, and so that's how I want my paper to be. When I put my arm on here, I want it to basically be able to wrap around like a little tortilla. Okay, you don't want to do it this way because you don't want to fall short. So make sure you've got the width horizontally. So there you go, nice and good. Now, the next thing you want to do, if you've got your paper ready to go, then make sure that you have one perfectly straight side down here on the bottom. If you've got that, then you're ready to go. Take this, fold it in half. That was easy. And yeah, there's going to be a lot of wasted paper. You know what? That's okay. I know I don't want to waste trees or anything like that, but if you have to choose between wasting paper or wasting leather, let's just go ahead and waste the paper. All right, so I've gone ahead and folded it in half. That is going to be the exact middle of your bracer. So your arm is basically going to go right on that line, like so. Now, how big do you make it? Well, this is where you take your very first measurement. So I'm going to take my tape measure. Now, like I said, if you don't have tape measure, get yourself just a little strip of paper like this. Here, I've got a little strip of paper. I'm going to go ahead and grab a utility blade. You can use scissors, whatever you want. And I just cut out a little strip of paper. You're going to need to find out how big your wrist is. So all you have to do is put it on here, wrap it around, and then just mark it. If you can't grab the pencil, oh, I forgot to grab a pencil, just hold it. That's good enough. That right there is going to tell you about how big your wrist is. If you'd like to measure it, then measure it. Measuring is always good. I'm always a big fan of numbers. So if I measure this 7 inches around here near my wrist, so I know that I'm going to need 7 inches down here. Now, I'm going to go ahead and split that in half. Half of 7 is 3.5. So basically, right here at the very edge, I'm going to put 3.5 going this way, 3.5 going this way, and I'm going to go ahead and measure that. So I'll grab this right here, and I've got 3.5, and over here, 7. And I'll just go ahead and draw this line because I want you to be able to see it a little bit better. And I know what you're thinking. You're probably like, well, I still can't see it because I'm way over there. Yeah, I know. That's why I'm going to go ahead and do this. So I'm coming way up here. And hopefully now, you've got a better view. Maybe you can see a little bit better. Yeah, there we go. So there's that middle line. And up at the top, 3.5, 3.5. And that should be exactly big enough to fit around my wrist. So there we go. Sorry? Yes, or the tape measure, either one. If you're using this little piece of paper and you're saying, but I don't have any numbers on here, that's easy. Take the strip of paper, fold that in half, and that little halfway mark is going to go right on your little halfway mark. And that's another way that you can mark it. And you can see, well, I can show you that my paper lines up exactly with the measurement that I took. So either way, you're going to get the same result. Okay. All right. Now, the next thing. You want to go ahead and figure out how big you want your bracer to be. Some people want their bracers to come all the way down here to the elbow. Some people want the bracer only to be like a little bracelet, you know, very, very short, not very big at all. Some people want it around to the middle. Wherever that's going to be, figure out how far that is from your wrist. What I mean by that is, here's my measuring tape. There's my wrist. I'm going to figure out where I'm coming down. Now, if you're coming all the way down here to your elbow, you don't want to measure that far. You basically want to measure the fattest part of your arm. So if I'm going to make this come all the way down to my elbow, then the fattest part of my arm is right there. And the fattest part of my arm is right about 6 inches. So I know that might be a little hard for you to play with and finagle and twist this around and figure out what that measurement is, but that's what you're going to have to do. You're going to want to figure out where the fattest part is. If you don't want it very big, if you're making a very small bracer, like about only that big, 4 inches, that's fine. Know that it's going to be 4 inches, and then remember where that 4-inch mark is. That's important to know. All right. So I'm going to make just a standard size bracer. So here's the fattest part of my arm right there. Fattest part of my arm is about 6 inches down. So now, where my fold is coming all the way down, I'm going to measure 6 inches, and then I'm going to mark the middle right there. So you can see what I'm talking about. There's the fold right there. Here's the fold. Here's the top. And I measured down 6 inches. That's about how far down my arm is going to be coming down, or actually it would be like this. So there we go. So 6 inches is good enough. Okay. Now, this next part is a little tricky. It's a nice little mathematical, what do you call it, trick. Basically, you want to take that little mark that you just finished making, and you want a perfectly straight, a perpendicular line that goes across this way. Now, there's a couple of ways to do that. I usually just use the sides of the paper, or I use this fold here in the middle as my guide. So wherever that mark is, I'm going to fold that mark on the outside, not with the mark on the inside, because then you're doing this number and trying to figure it out. Easier to have the mark on the outside so you can see where it is. Right where that mark is, I'm going to pinch it. And then after that, using my little lines, I'm just going to make sure that I have a little perpendicular fold. So basically what that amounts to is I've made a little cross. I've made a little halfway fold for my bracer. I've made a line that goes across where I want my bracer to kind of end, or the fattest part of my arm is. Your bracer can be bigger than this, that's fine. But you have to mark where you're going to have your greatest, your greatest width. That's it, all right? So now I've got this, now I've got that, I'm ready to go to the next step. Now, I said that I wanted to go ahead and make this come 6 inches down, correct? So there's 6 inches right there. You got to know where that is. After you know where that 6 inches is, now you have to measure the width going all the way around. So there's my 6 inches right there. I'm right here, and I'm going to go all the way around. And again, if you need a friend or something like that, that's fine. I'm just going to wrap it around here, and it looks like the circumference of my forearm is 11 inches. 11 inches. So now I know that I'm going to have to make this 5.5 and 5.5 on each side. So I'm going to put this right on that fold that I just finished making. And now I'm going to mark 5.5, and I'm going to mark 11. Now, I know I did it by 2. That's right. Well, same on the other side. Now I know that it's very hard to see what in the world I'm doing, even though I'm trying my best to make it dark. And I've done Zoom meetings before. I've had to do stuff like this. So in the face of you not being able to see my pencil lines, I can always use my friend, Mr. Sharpie, and then it should be a lot easier. So now you're going to see it looks almost like a little parallelogram. 2 little small lines here, 2 much bigger lines up here. See that? And that's what yours should look like. So I'm going to give you a little bit of time. Let's give you about 60 seconds, 120 seconds, 1 minute, 2 minutes, and see if you can line those up. Take those measurements and mark your paper out. Okay? So that's about what you want it to look like, which doesn't look like much yet, which is perfectly okay. Perfectly okay. And then we're going to actually make this incorrectly so that we can turn around and make it correctly. That's pretty much the way it's going to go. So it'll be great. Be a great time for some background music. Exactly the song knows. Mhm. It is. It is. Always best to have a friend. Yep. And then you get to cut that, fold it, whatever. And then after that, you'll fold it in half, find where the middle is. Remember, it's going to go all the way to the elbow. It's going to be very, very long. Then measure by your thickest part of your arm. And it doesn't matter how long it's actually going to go. You have to measure where the thickest part of your arm is. So right here is where it is. Don't measure all the way down to your elbow and then go around. That would be wrong. And don't, So figure it out and then fold it in half, put it down and mark it. Yeah, that's what happens when you have an artist that's also a math person. So take the measurement all the way around and measure how far it is from your wrist to that point. You have to know that length too. You need to know the length, you need to know the circumference. Yes. I don't want to tell people to mark themselves up, but yes, that probably works pretty well. Excellent. Oh, you have really good lighting where you are. I notice my lighting is not so good. Oh well. I guess I should the eye light or the eye ring or whatever the heck that is. That's right. Mm-hmm. And don't forget to measure the length from this to your point. Mm. Yeah, pattern making is pattern making, no matter what you're using. I would call it a synergistic skill. Okay, like I said, point. That's right. Yes, because that will give you a nice perpendicular line. It should be parallel to the bottom. There are lots of tricks. I mean, as an art teacher, there are lots of tricks to folding paper to make sure that it's straight, perpendicular, 45 degrees. So I'm full of those little helpful hints. All right, so got it. All right, so if you're kind of where we are, you should have fold this way, fold that way, and you should have 4 dots. Your wrist extremities, or I guess the circumference for the wrist, and over here, the circumference for your forearm, or the thickest part of your forearm. That's what you have right there, okay? Then after that, you're gonna break a little rule. I'm gonna go ahead and use my straight edge. And if you don't have a ruler, that's fine, but I would use some kind of straight edge. You're gonna connect the dots just like Claudia did over there, and you're just gonna run it all the way off the page. Doesn't matter if you get the right size or not, you're just going all the way off the page. What we really want is that angle. So, as you can see, I've got this horrific looking little parallelogram. This should be correct. Yeah. What did I say? Parallelogram? Oh, yeah, sure. This it also has on these, but you're right, it's a trapezoid.
Aren't you a teacher, Diego?
I am, and I tell my students to draw a trapezoid for the torso, so I can't believe I made that mistake. Oh well. Well, so there you go. So it should look like a little trapezoid. And again, these little marks right here are the ones you want. These are the ones that you want. Now, after that point, we're going to go ahead and cut this out. Now, I like to use a blade. So because of that, I always recommend having just a piece of plywood, cardboard, whatever, something that's underneath. Because if you're going to be cutting with a knife, you never want to do it on a nice table or something. I mean, everybody always says, well, I'll just be careful. No, that never happens. It always turns out disastrously. So yeah, make sure that you have something that you can damage underneath a knife. If you're going to use scissors, scissors work well. I like a knife because the knife can follow a straight edge, so it's a much more accurate cut. But, you know, you do you. So here I am just cutting this thing out. Yep. Your scissors. So this is what I should have right now. And it's oversized, and you can tell right now it's way, way, way too big, which is fine. Ain't no problem there. I even marked the length right there, so. Okay, there you go. Okay, now, if you've gotten to the point now where you've got the trapezoid, and so far these steps have been fairly simple, then the only other thing that you have to think about right now is how you're going to end this piece here. Very few people, when they make bracers, want that outside of that edge to be perfectly straight all the way across. If you do, you can do that, but most people want to make it very decorative. Like this bracer right here is decorative. It has a little point that goes all the way up here to this little tip. I have other bracers that have like a little curve. You can always curve it going the opposite way. It's just basically if you make an embellishment on this edge, then you don't have to worry so much about making it look too perfect. If you try to make it perfectly round all the way around, then it would be a little more challenging. So basically, what I'm telling you to do is this. Wherever that little mark is, it's only important here, and it's only important here, not in the middle. Now, I'm just going to make a design that comes up to this center line right here. It can be a straight line, a concave curve, it comes out, however you want. I'm just going to go ahead and make a curve like that. See, and it sticks out quite a bit, but that's okay. Whoops. The important thing is, it's much higher than the thickest part of my. If you don't want to bring it up this far, you don't have to. But this is going to pretty much going to figure out how long your bracer is going to be. So if you don't want to make it very big, you can just make a line like that. Or you can even make one that comes way down here. Now I want you to notice that all the lines I'm making are on one side and not the other. That's because this bracer is going to be symmetrical. We are going to fold this in half, and we're only going to cut one side. So whatever we cut on one side is going to be exactly the same on the other side. Now, the only thing that I would caution you about is if you're going to make this relatively flat, if you're going to have this coming down, the one thing you don't want to do is you don't want to have this thing coming up and then down like a little heart. That never turns out very well. If you're trying to make this come across, you want to make sure that right here in the middle, it's either pointed up or it's perfectly flat here in the middle. Here in the middle, I would go like that to make sure it's perfectly straight across. You want it to be either flat or a point up here, but you don't want the point to come down. If the point comes down, it's going to look fairly awkward. It just will. Let's take a look. You can do that. That's fine. I mean, you can have any sort of design. And again, the great thing about paper is if you mess up, chunk it, start over again. Now that I have this design, I'm going to go ahead and fold it in half so I can see the design on the outside. Then I'm going to put it on my cutting board, and I'm going to cut it with a knife, or just use your scissors and cut it out. That is not as significant. So right here, I think I'll just cut that, and I'm done. So I cut a little point. I open it up. That's what it looks like. And at this point, it should already fit around, and the fit should be pretty darn good. It may not be perfectly accurate, but it's going to be pretty close. It should touch right there in the middle. So I'll let everybody get up to that point right there. If you have any difficulties, let me know. Like I said, if you make a terrible mistake or you want to start all over again, it's a very small matter to start over again. Always make sure you got a handy dandy trash can. Yeah, if you like it, keep it. If you don't, you can always trim it down. Remember, I always try to tell people to start with more than you need, because it's much easier to take away or to cut more than it is to try to build up. If you think you cut too much, you probably want to start over again. If you want to cut a little bit more to alter that, you can. If you're happy with it, well, then fine. Then we don't have a problem. We'll keep going. And then you're good to go. Yeah, that's one thing I would give a little bit of a warning about. When I said that you want to measure this to your thickest side, that's usually right here. I mean, if it's going to be super, super long, the thickest side is pretty much where you want it to stop. Anywhere beyond that, and that leather's probably going to come in right into the little, I guess what, the valley of your elbow, which is a very uncomfortable spot for it to be when you bend your arm. So make sure you've got some comfort, or you got some give there. You don't want it to crash into your elbow. That's going to cause you problems later. If you need to take some away from there, I would. Okay, if I put mine here, when I put mine together, I fall way short of the little valley of my elbow. And so I've got plenty of give to be able to move up and without the paper being too much of a hindrance. Okay, now the only other, sorry? Okay. Now the only other thing, now that you have this, the next thing is going to be the little wrist part. Now, the back doesn't really matter what it looks like. You can basically make it as, I guess what, as decorative as you want to, and that takes away a lot of the need to be super, I guess what, precise. You don't need to worry about it because it's supposed to look very pretty. The one place where you do want it to be precise or to be very careful is up here where the wrist is. Because when you put your hand in here, you're going to notice that you've got a weird little curve. As I put this thing around like this, if I don't have my arm here and I put it together, you're going to notice that it's basically got a little slant to it. If you join up these little lines right here, it's slanted. It's not a straight line. If I were to put it this way, upside down, it would want to fall over because it's not a straight line. Yeah, that little dip down there in the middle. Now, if that doesn't bother you, well then fine, I guess you're good to go. For most people, since this part sticks up, that's the part that sticks out, which is the part that's at the very top, that would annoy most people when they're coming up here. It would. They would be like, ah, man, that ticks me off. I don't like it. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to basically put this together like so that you've got both pieces there. You've got that little neck in the back right there that you want to get rid of. And basically, you're going to have to cut this so that it's straight all the way across. Now, this is very, very different from person to person. Because if you have a much bigger forearm, then this angle is going to be much different. This thing is going to be much different. So the easiest way to tell you to cut this is to do this little trick right here. I'm basically going to put it together. I'm going to bring it down, and I'm going to try and make it touch the line that's back there. See how I made that little crease in the very middle there? I'm going to basically try to close this like little doors so that they come down right on that line. Then after that, with my pencil, I'm just going to try to sketch as straight a line on there as I possibly can. Let's see if I can stick some light on here. And so basically you can see I have a little straight line coming across there. So I close my little doors and then I try to straighten that out. Then after I have that, I'm going to make a little cut. So take my little scissors and check. Mm-hmm. That will work. Yes, but don't take too much. You only want to take the bare minimum. You want to take as little as possible. So I would get that line a little bit higher. Was it? Oh, well, then that's where it's going to go. That number won't lie to you, or that line won't lie to you. Now, after that, you're going to open it up, and you're going to see, because I made a little fold on the sides, I got this straight little line here. You know, normally this would be curved more. And if you really want to make this very, very precise, then you could try to curve it a little bit. But for all practical purposes now, when I put this together, it becomes a straight line, which is what I wanted in the first place. So now I have it nice and straight on one side and beautifully irregular on the other. Nice and straight over here. Nothing like straight over here. And that's basically it. That's my pattern. Dun, dun, dun. Now,
that looks pretty good, Carlos.
Thanks. This right here is your, now this is your very basic pattern right here. There's only one other thing that you need on this paper to figure out how to do the rest, and that really is it depends on what your fastening method is going to be. Some people like to use the little strings right here, and they use strings to go ahead and tie this across, which is the easiest, the simplest, the most no-nonsense way to do it. The only problem with having strings is the string, the knot that you make, almost invariably comes untied. And the other problem is if you've got an arm like mine, where I've got bare skin, and I'm sitting here pulling on the strings, yeah, that'll more than once give you a nice little nasty burn there on your arm for where those little strings are pulling. Now, once you've got it on, it's not an issue, but it's just the nature of the beast. The other thing. Okay. I think lacing is the best way to get the best fit, because you can always get tight and it's always adjustable. I mean, it's if you get a little bit bigger, you get a little bit thinner. If somebody wants to borrow it, then it easily adjusts to anybody. So that's the advantage there. Belts, I think I like to use straps. I like to use belts, and the simple reason is it's more custom. It's more custom. I mean, if you're going to make belts, you're pretty much going to make it so that only a few people can wear it, because not everyone's going to line up with you. But most of the armor that I make, I don't try to put it on bare skin. I try to put it on cloth. And straps are, if you have bracers on cloth and you use straps, yeah, the straps may not be perfect, but it will catch on cloth well enough to hold the armor in place. And you'll have to worry much less about your bracer like sliding off into your arm. That's the one thing that having cloth underneath or wearing a shirt underneath a bracer really, really helps with. It helps keep that bracer in place. So, yeah. For this, I'm sorry. Yeah. I mean, personally, the easiest way, always going to be lacing, always. I mean, that's just the way it goes. I mean, that's the way I'm going to show you how to do it right here. So, yeah, lacing is going to be the way to go. Now, the lacing. That's going to be your side, and that's going to be your side. Now, here's a little trick. I showed this to Angelina 2 weeks ago, and she was floored by it, and I didn't think it was a really big deal, but she was just like, wow, I've never seen that done before. It's not a big deal. If you get a regular old piece of paper like this one, you can make a paper guide. Now, Unfortunately, I know Claudia doesn't have a ruler. It's going to hurt you this time because like rulers are just like the best thing to have. Let's say that I want to go ahead and put holes for lacing. If I'm going to put holes, I want the holes to be about 1/2 inch away from the sides. So I could either sit there and try to draw a line or try to measure here or there, or I could make a guide. I take a little piece of paper like this. I'm going to measure 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch. So I make 2 little markings on opposite ends of the paper. Then I'm going to take this ruler, line them up, and cut it out. And basically all I did was just cut out a strip of paper that's 1/2 inch wide. That's all. Nothing special. But basically, whatever method you want, about a little 1/2 inch. If you don't have one of these, or if you don't have a ruler, or you can't measure this, I would just cut out a strip of paper. Now, after you have this is going to be your guide for absolutely everything else. So now I don't need the ruler. I'm just going to take this. I'm going to put it right here on the edge of my bracer, right on the edge, and now I'm going to trace my line. And look at that, 1/2 inch all the way. Now I'm going to go to the other side. I'm going to put it right here next to the side, and I'm just going to trace it. Hey, check it out, 1/2 inch all the way down. Now, probably not, and not that big of a deal. Huh? I'm sorry? You can use the, there you go. Yeah, anything you can use as a guide is a good thing to have. And this might not seem like such a big deal, just kind of like, oh, I could have just traced that and just put the holes in there anyway. That's true. It's not that miraculous right now. If you were to do something like, oh, I don't know, put designs or put a border around here, then that guide becomes a real time saver, especially if you're going around a curve, because that guide is much easier to go around a curve than taking a ruler and making little marks all over the place. That's just a pain. So it saves you a lot of time in the long run. So now, let me get my marker. I want to make sure you can see this. Here and here. So now I have drawn a line here that's 1/2 inch and a line here that's 1/2 inch. That's where all the holes for my lacing is going to go. On here and here, and they're going to close together right there. So that's where the holes are going to go. Now, honestly, you don't have to draw the holes on both sides. We can use the same trick we used before, just fold it in half. Whatever you cut on one side is going to get cut on the other side. I just wanted to show you how to make those on either side so they're easy to see. So yes, that is correct, Claudia. So good and good. There we go. Now, after that, where do you put the holes? Now, it would be a great time to have a ruler, because now you're going to have to measure and figure out how to do this. Now, there is another way that I can get you going, Claudia. There is, but for right now, let's go ahead and put this for people who do have a ruler. So I'm going to measure the length of this side right here, and it says that it's 6 3/4 inches. That stinks. I don't like that. This would be so much easier to do if this was like, oh, I don't know, 5 inches. So basically what I'm going to do, I know I have to keep going around my table, my own table. So now here it is, about 6 and some odd inches. So much easier if this was 5. So I'm going to bring this in right here. That right there is a good starting point, and that's 0. That right here is a good starting point, and that's 5. And there, now I have 2 dots. And that makes it much easier to line up the rest of the holes over here. Because now that I know that I have 5 inches here, I can decide, do I want to put 2 more holes? Do I want to put just 1? Do I want to put 5? I could put a hole at every single inch. Done. I could put one at 2.5. Done. I could put one at 1.5, 3, 4.5. I mean, you can basically make up whatever pattern that you want and line it up however you'd like. But having a ruler helps a lot. If you don't have a ruler, you can use the good old strip of paper. Take a good old strip of paper, figure out where you want your first hole to be. Right there. Your last hole to be right there. So I have a hole at the beginning, I have a hole at the end. I'm going to take my paper and here.
Did you tell me to do something though?
No.
So now I have a strip of paper that goes from my first hole to my last hole. I think I will fold it in half and
Get all distracted.
fold it in half. Now that I folded it, every single bit one of those
That
holes is
discomfort miserable or
going to be where I put those holes. So dot, 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 and finish.
Yeah.
And finish. So I've got.
All right.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Not the exact same size, because remember, the first hole's not going to be on the very outside edge. The first hole has to be
Tell me you're going to go over there.
in just a little bit. The first
Tell me
one.
you're going to go over there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Oh, yeah, I'll get to that in a second. So, there you've got me. I've never done anything that fancy for bracers. I mean, for bracers, it's a very, I guess, what, tennis shoe kind of an arrangement. Oh, well, if it works for one application, then it should work for another. If it's something that you're familiar with, I would say yes. I have seen some people who have even put buttons on here as a method for being able to put these together. I've seen some people use snaps. So, I mean, the fastening method is not the critical issue. Obviously, if it's something that you've used before and you have faith that it'll work, I would give it a shot. I mean, there's no reason not to. Mhm. Wow. Mhm. Yeah, and you have to remember the holes are actually not like pin dots. They're actually fairly large size, so they're going to take up some distance. Yeah, you'll probably still have enough. I'm just letting you know. Uh, if you're just using regular old Latigo lacing, or if you're using paracord, the holes don't have to be that close together, and you don't need that many of them. You can. You just remember, however many holes you have, that greatly multiplies how much string you're going to need to close that thing up. So that's something to consider. Paracord, very inexpensive. If you're using Latigo, very pricey. You probably wouldn't want to do too many holes if you're using Latigo. Yeah, that's a little more safe. Now, on my example, I have 4 on this side, and on my other side, I have 5, just to show you how I came up. So now I'm going to fold it in half. I'm going to pick my best one. Either I want 4 holes or I want 5. Now I'm going to take my.
Well, all right.
Dun, 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 dun.
I said, well, all right.
So, and so I think I'm going to pick let's pick 4. That way I'm going to use less string. And so right here, I'm just going to punch the hole through both sides of the paper at the same time. There's my hole. There's my hole. And all the way to the other end. So now I've got 4 on each side, very evenly spaced, exactly the same. Done. Oh, that might be That might be hard to overlook. Okay. Now, you're trying to use the, yeah. There is a there is a trick to putting a hole in there with a pencil or a pen. If you have your paper and you're trying to punch a hole in these, if you have corrugated cardboard, just the cardboard that has all the little wavy lines inside there, if you take your paper, you put it on the cardboard, and then you punch the hole, you have a much better chance of making a round hole, pushing a hole instead of ripping it diagonal. Because that's the worst thing that can happen when you try to punch it like with your fingers, is you're going to make a tear that goes down the sides. If you're punching through something that has some give to it, you're going to make a better circle. Oh, well, there you go. Okay, now, believe it or not, once you've gotten to this point, you are pretty much done with your pattern. At this point, you are ready to transfer this onto your piece of leather. So, I know that you don't have a piece of leather, but leather. Now, two very, two very important things with leather. Typically, if you're making a pattern with paper that's going to fit around your arm and it goes exactly where it's supposed to go, and then you make it out of leather and you try to put it on your arm, you're going to find that it's going to come up just a little short. That's because leather is thicker than paper. So anytime you make a pattern out of paper and then cut it out of leather, you're going to lose a little bit because the thickness of that leather is going to pull that back. So normally I would say, well, you don't want this stuff touching here, so you want to take a little bit off. You can do that, or you can just cut it exactly like this. Chances are when you cut it out in leather, it's going to pull back on its own. So you don't have to worry about that. You don't have to make a seam allowance, really. You're going to lose a little bit when you transfer from paper to leather. Exactly the line. Exactly the line. Yes. And I heard people saying, well, you want to use chocolate. So many things people use. Some people say, oh, always do it with pencil. Some people say, always make sure that you're using a stylus and you're just pushing on the leather. Some people say, use a pen. Some people say, never use a pen. What I have discovered is if I usually use a pen now. I didn't used to, and I used to think it was a bad practice, but now I almost always use a pen for the simple reason that if I use a pen, it is much, much easier to see that line. And that's a real big deal. You're going to have enough problems cutting this thing out. You don't want to guess where the lines are. You want to know exactly where they are. And if you cut them, you're going to have the temptation, oh, well, I don't want those pen lines on my armor. I'd better, cut on the inside of that pen line so it's gone. You don't have to worry about that either. Most people, when they're working on leather, they finish the edges. Finishing the edges is something that you do in fabric. It's just done a different way. With fabric, you basically have to hem the sides in. With leather, you're going to do what's called slicking the edges. When you slick it, you're basically going to use a tool like this one. Let me grab it. You're going to use this little bad boy right here. Now this is an edger. It actually takes a little bit of the tooth off your leather. If I've got a little piece of leather right here, I'm basically going to take this and run it across the edge. And I know you're not going to be able to see what I'm doing exactly, but I'm running over this edge here, and then I want you to notice what I just pulled. That right there is leather off of the edge. Okay, I'm looking at something. What am I doing? Okay. Yeah, it's just slicking the leather. Slicking it, basically you have to start by cutting out this little edge up here on the top, taking this and cutting the top edge, and then you're gonna flip it over, cut the bottom. And then after that, you're going to get water, or you can even use spit, or you can use gum, and you're basically gonna round the edges really, really hard by using a slicking tool. Where is my slicking tool? Huh. Mhm. No, don't use that. No, no, no. A nail file or sandpaper is actually really, really good if you have a very uneven edge or a jagged edge, or you made a rough cut, or you have little pieces sticking out. Then that is good for being able to smooth that edge out. Slicking is different. Slicking is basically you're wetting the leather and then you're rubbing it with a round tool. And what's happening when you're rubbing that round tool is you're basically raising the temperature of the leather. When that happens, a little chemical, or I guess it has a reaction where the side actually gets super, super glossy and super, super smooth. It's something you could not do with sandpaper. You could not do with anything. In fact, if you go to a YouTube video and just look at how to slick leather, it'll tell you. And you usually have to use a little wooden tool, and it's round. And I can't believe I've misplaced mine because I was using it this morning. But I'm really annoyed about that. But yeah. There it is. I found it. This little bad boy. This is a slicker. Beautiful. I know. Now, the way that this works.
You pretty much just need anything smooth. You can do it with a smooth piece of wood.
Yeah.
You can do it with a bone. You can do it with a piece of plastic. You just need
You do it
smooth.
with
Your
like a
goal is to create friction and kind of bond the fibers.
Mm-hmm. So basically, I've basically cut off a little edge, little corner there. After that, you're gonna wet it, and yeah, like I said, you could use anything. You can even use spit, and it doesn't really matter. Yeah. Congrats.
Congratulations.
And then this thing, of course, see all the little grooves in here? Those little grooves basically represent where this thing is going to come inside. You're just going to rub it. And you don't have to rub hard. You're not trying to jam it. You're just trying to make heat. That means you need speed above anything else. And as I'm rubbing this and rubbing it and rubbing it, and it'll take a minute, then it starts getting very slick. It almost looks waxed. That's what the texture should be when you rub it with your fingers. It'll feel like it's been waxed, even though all you've basically done is just knit the fibers together. That's all it is.
What happens if you skip this step?
Nothing. It's purely aesthetic. I mean, really, it just tends to make it look finished. That's all.
Okay, cool.
Right. Yeah. If anyone else has any questions about how to put this together or any how-tos or whatever, you can always reach out to me. I mean, I usually tell people, yes, it's hot in my garage, and yes, it's uncomfortable, and that's the price that you pay for getting help from me. But if you want to come out here, I'm usually pretty available. I mean, obviously right now, you know, safety might be a concern and everything with the pandemic and everything, but normally if you want to reach out, just hit me up. If I'm free, I'll give you whatever help I can give you.